So today, I'm working on this. Stay tuned. Hey guys, so for those of you that don't know, my name is Michael and I am the woodworker for MK Designs. And yeah, if you'll remember a couple weeks back, I had a video about how to divide a circle into equal parts, and I did two different ones. I did 6 parts and 12 parts, and I'll walk you through the steps to be able to do that. And hopefully I explained it a little easier, a little better to some of you that have been wondering about it and couldn't quite get it right. Hopefully it helps. If you haven't watched that video, you should go over and check it out. I think it's really informative. But at any rate, this is the project I was referring to in that video. I had a client reach out to me and she sent me a picture of a rotating shoe rack that someone had on Etsy or something like that. I don't remember exactly where. Asked if this was something I could build. And I'm like, absolutely, I can do this. And so I got to talking to her about dimensions and things like that. And she informed me that it was going into a 9-foot tall closet. The math didn't quite work out for the height of the shelves that she wanted to be 9 feet. So it's 100 inches, I believe. You'll see it in the video how tall it actually winds up being. But it's around 100 inches, a little over 8 feet. And this thing's really, really tall. I mean, it's so tall that I could not fully assemble it inside my shop because my ceiling is 8 feet. But I did get it assembled inside the house where our ceilings are 12 feet. And yeah, well, I was able to get it measured, and I did it outside the shop to get a measurement and all that. And but it all worked out really well. It has 2 different sections. They both rotate individually. And I do not have plans for this because it is such a simple build. I'll just give you the measurements of everything in the video, because it is super simple. It's just a repetitive repeat of different parts, and everything's pretty much cut the same, and it's got 2 Lazy Susans on it, things of that nature. Also, I bought a Milescraft jig, circle cutting jig for this, and I pretty much decided to dedicate my DeWalt router to it. I wound up buying a new router to replace the DeWalt, so I dedicated my DeWalt router to this jig because the base of it works for a lot of the different Milescraft jigs. And I'll give you a little bit of review in the video on this jig, what I think about it. And I do have a circle cutting jig for my bandsaw as well, but I haven't quite tuned that one in quite right, and this one got me up and running quickly, and I've wanted it for a while anyway, so I went ahead and ordered it for this project. Okay, that's enough of me talking. Let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to mark off the boundaries of my circles. Typically when I first start a project that I haven't done before, or one that I haven't done in a while, I will go on YouTube or other platforms and I'll watch videos of other people, what they have done. And on YouTube, a lot of the videos, they break down the plywood first. I decided not to do that with this because it just saved a step, and I just cut my circles directly out of the full 4x8 sheet, and you'll see how that works here in just a moment. And I do apologize for the focus on the video, guys. I don't know what happened. Apparently my camera was on autofocus, and I didn't realize it until after I had downloaded the footage and started putting it together here. So hopefully it'll straighten out here shortly, but yeah, I do apologize for that. So the diameter of the shelves is 21 inches. So what I did was I went through and I marked at 22 or 23 inches. I'm not sure which one. I think it was probably 23 or 24, honestly. But once I had the marks, then I just took my straight edge and ran a straight line between them and divided the sheet into 8 equal squares so that I could cut the shelves out of those. Once I had all my squares laid out, then I took my straight edge and I marked corner to corner so I could locate the center of each square. And once I have all those marked, then I'm ready to set up the jig and start cutting out the circles. Okay, so the first thing you have to do to set the jig up to cut the circle out is you have to drill a hole in the center of the board that you're going to cut the circle out of. And what you're doing is you're drilling a pilot hole for the screw that holds down the guide bushing that you set the jig on, that, yeah, it basically allows you to rotate around the center. Once you have the guide bushing in place, then you take the jig, once you have it set to the diameter of the circle you're wanting to cut, and you place it on there, and then you put your router in with this special plate that you attach to the base, and it just clicks into place, and you're all set to go. You'll cut about a 1/4 inch at a time. So for 3/4 inch material like this is, I had to take about 3 passes to get my entire circle cut out. Okay, so I told you guys I would give you a little bit of a review, basically just letting you know what my thoughts on this jig are in this video, and this is as good a place as any to do it, because all I'm doing is plunging down about a 1/4 inch and locking it in place, then making my first round. I had to do this 3 times, like I said, for each circle. So yeah, this jig, it worked extremely well out of the box. I mean, I was extremely surprised. It took me a little bit to figure out which screw holes to use on the plate to be able to get it to attach to my router, but once I had that, it was extremely easy to figure out. It's got little guides on it, little lines, little markings to tell you what to do. It comes with detailed instructions. You can cut 4-foot wide circles with this thing, so you can cut, actually you can cut bigger than that. I think it's up to like 50 inches. So you can cut, big dining room tables, round dining room tables with it, and you can cut all the way down to as small as 1.5 inches with it. Not sure I'll ever cut circles that small with my router, but I can with this jig. So I like it a lot, and like I said, the plate that you attach to the router, it actually attaches to a lot of the Milescraft jigs, like the sign making jig and things like that. So it's, in my opinion, it was a really good purchase, and I didn't spend a whole lot of money on it. I'll put a link down in the description of the video for this particular jig if you'd be interested in it. So yeah, after I make my first pass here, I will be making 2 more passes. And I will say this, if you're going to do it the way that I'm doing it here, make sure you have it fully supported. I had this sitting on my Boris Centipede and just a piece of foam insulation board. So when I made the final pass, this first piece, because I wasn't thinking about it, you can see it on the corner there, it's not fully supported. It kind of flopped on me. It didn't damage anything at all, really. Nothing I couldn't sand out anyway, but it's just something to keep in mind for the future, and if you're going to use this jig, and use it the same way that I did here. And then once you're done with your final pass, you just unscrew the guide bushing and you've got a perfect circle. And now I just have to repeat this 13 times. And this is what your piece of plywood looks like once you're done cutting out those 8 circles. With all my circles cut out, now I'm going to get started on cutting out the dividers, and I'm going to rip the sheet down on the table saw first, rip them to width. And the dimensions on these are 5 inches by 9 inches. So I'm going to rip them down to 5 inches on the table saw, and then I'm going to take them over the miter saw and cross cut them down to 9 inches from there. Once I get them over to the miter saw, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off the end to get a nice square end, and then I'll move it over to my stop and cut it off at the 9 inches. And I only have to repeat this 60 times. Yes, 60. That's what I said. Yeah, you thought I was going to make you watch me cut all 60 of them, didn't you? Yeah, nah. Once I have all those cut, now I want to go ahead and put on my Lazy Susan to make sure I get them lined up right. And it makes it a little easier once I have the whole thing assembled, if I know exactly where they're supposed to go. And I created a little paper template, and you can see I run a nail up through the hole that I drilled for the circle cutting jig, and I'm using the template to help mark things out so that I can get it lined up just right on both sides. So what I did was I used the paper template to mark the holes, and then I'll take my awl and I'll put a mark on the wood with it and drill my holes using that. Have those drilled, then I will attach the Lazy Susan with the screws using the holes I just drilled. Alright, and while I've got it on there, I'm going to mark where the big hole is going to go. And what the big hole is used for is used to be able to access the screws to be able to attach it to the top part. And yeah, so I'm going to mark it, then I'm going to take the Lazy Susan off, I'm going to drill the big hole and move from there. Once I have the hole drilled and the Lazy Susan reattached to the bottom, then I'm going to set the top on it, and I'm going to flip the whole thing over, and I'm going to use the big hole to access to mark where the screws need to go to attach it to the top. And then it's complete, and I have a functioning Lazy Susan. Now with that part out of the way, it's time to start getting everything ready for assembly. So the first thing I need to do is, because I'm going to be using dominoes to assemble this, I'm going to have to run the mortises. So I'm going to run them into the dividers first and get those all ready to go. Yes, all 60 of them, which means I need 240. Yeah, 240 mortises in 60 dividers. So after I have all 240 of them cut, then I need to put the mortises in the shelves. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run my pilot hole all the way through so that I can use a little roofing nail to reference my template off of. This is what I needed to be able to make a template and to be able to divide a circle into 6 equal parts, because each shelf is going to have 6 dividers. So, and I want them lined up exactly to each other. So yeah, I created the template, and then the center of my template I place on my nail, and it fits onto my shelf perfectly. And you see I got the little cutouts there. I'll use those cutouts to mark the end of where the divider will go, and I'll run a straight line from one side to the other. That way I can line them center to center straight up. Okay, so now I'm going to transfer the lines to the side so that I can reference them on the other side of the shelf, because I'm going to have my shelves alternating. So this side will be lined up on these lines, and the other side will be lined up directly in between them. And I've got a little mark on my template so that when I flip it over, I can line up one of the corners, and boom, I got it set to be perfectly lined up halfway between this side. And everything just runs so smoothly that way. And yes, I know I have an extra line in there. It doesn't get in my way, but if you're doing this and you have that line, you can always erase it out, sand it off, something along those lines. Now I'm ready to cut the mortises, and there is an easier way to do this, but I didn't know it until after I had done all this, and I'll put that in another video. But there actually is an easier way to reference these lines on the domino if you're going to use domino joiner. If you're going to use pocket screws, it's a completely different story, and you would do it similar to this. But what I did was I took a waste block and I marked the center of it on both sides so I could line it up on my marks. And then I took another scrap piece and clamped it down on top of the shelves and used that for reference for the base of my domino. And that got me 2 straight mortises, and it worked out just fine. But like I said, there is an easier way to do it, and I'll cover that in another video. Okay, so now with all my mortises cut, I want to do a dry fit before I move forward any. So I'm gonna put the dominoes into the dividers, and I'm gonna assemble it and see how everything fits together. Make sure I did everything right. Once I have all the dominoes into the dividers, then I just attach it to the shelf. And you can see I've already got one assembled back there, and I just took this one shelf at a time and made sure everything fit properly and tested how everything was going to fit together. I did have to do a little bit of finagling to make sure everything lined up right, and you'll see that here in a moment where I had to work around each shelf, but it all worked out really well and came together exceptionally well in my opinion. And this is how I attach the shelves together. So basically I just line up the first one and then tap it down a little bit. And you can see it's a little bit off on the right, but that's okay, because as I work around, I'll shift it and get it all lined up. And doing this step actually helped me figure out how I was going to do final assembly and to make it go a little bit easier on myself. That's one of the reasons for doing a dry fit. Number one, to make sure everything fits together like you want it to, and two, to find out exactly what you need to do for your final assembly to get it to look and go exactly the way you want it to. But yeah, I just worked my way around and just tapped in and got everything lined up, and it all went together really well and really easily. So before I attached the bottom shelf, I decided to put leveling feet on it, and so I'm just drilling out the holes to be able to put the metal inserts in that I can screw the little leveling feet into. And here are the two halves before I connect them together with another Lazy Susan. And with the dry assembly done, I'm just testing out the Lazy Susans to make sure they're working the way I want them to work. Everything looks good. So here's a couple of pictures to show you just how tall this thing is. Now remember, I'm 6'5" and I can't reach the top. So yeah, it's exactly 100 inches. I had to get on a step ladder to get this measurement. So now the only thing left to do is start getting it ready for final assembly. And the first step of that is sanding it. So I'm getting everything sanded smooth with 150 grit. I didn't really sand anything below that because it's plywood, and yeah, it was clean, so I didn't need to sand below that. So I sanded it at 150 just to get it smooth and get a good surface for finish. Well, the paint, then finish. But yeah, you get the point. So after I'm finished sanding, then I need to work on my edge banding. So I'm going to edge band all these pieces, and there's a lot of pieces to cut. So I just made this little jig, that way I could just slide it in, cut it off, slide it in, cut it off, and yeah, got all 120 of them cut in probably about 10-15 minutes this way. It didn't take that long at all, actually. It probably goes without saying, but I used this jig to cut the pieces for all the dividers. For the shelves themselves, I just cut one piece and then used it to cut my following pieces, and I cut all 14 of them. Yeah, 13 of them that way, and it worked out great. So now I'm all set to attach the edge banding, and the first thing I'm going to do is get a square edge. And so I just got a scrap block and a square and a knife, and just cut a little bit off one end to get it square. So you may have noticed in the last clip that I had one of the shelves actually hanging off the side of my bench, and this is why. I did this. What I did was I ran a framing nail through one side of a piece of scrap, and then I screwed the scrap to the edge of my assembly table, and I'm just using it to help support it and make it easier to turn as I'm sanding and then as I start the edge banding. Once I have the edge banding started, then I will take it and set it on a piece of scrap on the table just to elevate it off the table a little bit so that I can work the edge banding around. I don't have to worry about it crimping or getting underneath the shelf, and I can get my iron and my roller around it and get it laid out that way. So now as I reach the end of the shelf, I have to cut it off a little bit and get it to fit just right. So what I'm doing is I'm laying it on top of where I started it, and then I will take my square and I'll cut it off about a 32nd to a 16th longer, and then I will just I'll pry it in there and press it down, and that should create a nice tight seal all the way around. So once I have that complete and I let it sit and let the glue dry for about 15-20 minutes, then I need to trim it all up, and so I'll take my little trimmer and trim it down, and this will allow me to see any spots that I might have missed with the heat and that didn't adhere quite right, so I can go back over with the iron and my roller and get that all pressed down, and then I can come back with 220 grit sandpaper and sand it all clean and flush and smooth, and shelves are done. Needless to say, edge banding the dividers was a little bit easier. I just had to lay it on there and iron it on, let it set, trim off the edges and the ends, and sand it. And that was that. They were done. And we're coming into the final stretch. Next thing I have to do is get it finished. I want to finish it before I do the final assembly. And the first thing to do for that is paint. My customer wanted it white, so I used the Ultra Pure White, I think it was, Bear Marquee from Home Depot. And it pretty much went on with one coat. I did have to touch up a few spots, but nothing major, especially on the edge banding and stuff like that. But it pretty much covered one coat. So I let the paint dry overnight, and then I applied Varathane water-based polyurethane. And the reason I went with water-based is because I didn't want it to yellow over time, and I wanted to protect the paint. And you guys know that I love lacquer, but lacquer and latex paint, they don't mix real well. So I used a poly on this. And I just used my HVLP sprayer and sprayed it on, and it went on really good. I sanded a couple of times between coats. I think I put 3 coats of poly on, and yeah, it was all good. Time for final assembly once that was cured. So once the poly is dry, and it's time for final assembly. And I did make one slight change to my assembly. I did add some of the domino quit connectors, just because, like I said, I think I said in the beginning that when I turned it on its side, it didn't feel, the Lazy Susans didn't feel very strong that direction. So I wanted to make sure that I could get this thing transported and assembled in the customer's home without any issues. And the ones that I offer on my website, they actually come flat packed. So what I did was I took the domino connectors and I put them all the front, the ones on the edge, the dominoes that go on the edge of the dividers. I made all those quick connectors, and that way it can be flat packed, and there'll be detailed instructions and a video on how to actually assemble these things in your home when you get it there. That way I can flat pack and ship it just about anywhere. So once again, same as before, except this time I'm adding glue. I put glue in the mortises, and then I add the dominoes, and then I just tap everything together like I did before for the dry assembly. And then it's ready to go home. Okay, so yeah, that's it. Like I said, it's a very simple build. Anybody can do it, and whether you use dominoes or pocket holes or whatever, it's just a repeat of different steps. You cut your circles out, you cut out your dividers, you run your domino mortises or your pocket holes, and you just attach everything. You can use glue, you don't have to. I did, just to help hold it together a little bit. And as you saw, I used some of the domino connectors on parts of it. That's because when I laid it over on its side, it was a bit heavy for what I thought the Lazy Susans could actually hold in that direction. They're perfectly strong standing straight up and down, but when you lay them over on their side, I'm not sure that the racking force on it wouldn't damage the Lazy Susan. So I did it this way so I can make quick assembly of it. And also, it was also a test because I wanted to put these on my website, which they are up on my website. I do have them for sale. So if anybody would like to purchase one without building it yourself, you certainly can. And they're not all 8 feet tall. I have different sizes, down to 4 feet, I think it is. And on the website, there's descriptions of each size that I have. Yeah, so like I said, if you have any questions, be sure to put a comment add a comment down in the video, or email me. I'll answer anything that I can. If not, I will point you in the right direction to someone that should be able to answer it for you. Oh yeah, one more time. Kat and I have started a group on Facebook called Happy Creating. This group is for anyone who creates. Painters, woodworkers, unicorn spit, chefs, anything that's creating. And so if you just go onto Facebook and search Happy Creating, you should be able to find us. And yeah, so that's about it. I do have some big things coming up, some things that I am really excited about announcing to you guys. Yeah, so until next time, guys, happy creating.